There is a reason some mornings feel heavy before your feet even touch the floor. There is a reason your mind starts racing before the sun even rises. And there is a reason the enemy fights hardest in the early hours of your day, because if he can control your morning, he can influence your focus, your peace, your decisions, and your strength. But today, that cycle ends. Because before the world speaks to you, God wants to speak first. And the moment you learn how to begin your morning in God's presence, instead of panic, everything changes. Do you know why Psalm 5 has survived for more than 3,000 years? Because it speaks directly to the battle most people silently fight every single morning. The battle between peace and pressure, between trust and anxiety, between surrender and control. Long before smartphones, deadlines, stress, notifications, bills, and endless distractions existed, David understood something that still remains true today. The condition of your morning shapes the condition of your soul. And maybe that's exactly where you are right now. Maybe you woke up already carrying pressure. Pressure about money. Pressure about your future. Pressure about your children. Pressure about your health. Pressure about decisions you still don't know how to make. Maybe your body woke up before your spirit did. Maybe your mind started running before your heart had time to breathe. Maybe you smiled on the outside, while internally you already feel exhausted. And before you even prayed, life started demanding things from you. But listen carefully to me. God never intended for you to begin your day carrying burdens you were never designed to hold alone. That is why David says in Psalm 5, "In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly." Notice the order. Before David faces people, he faces God. Before he enters battle, he enters prayer. Before he answers the voices around him, he listens for the voice above him. And that changes everything. Because the truth is, the first voice you listen to in the morning often becomes the loudest voice guiding your entire day. If the first voice is fear, you move through the day anxious. If the first voice is pressure, you move through the day stressed. If the first voice is social media, comparison begins stealing your peace before breakfast. If the first voice is negativity, your perspective becomes dark before the day even begins. But when the first voice is God, peace enters differently. Strength enters differently. Wisdom enters differently. Even your breathing changes when your soul remembers who is truly in control. And that's what this moment is about. This is not just another motivational message. This is spiritual alignment. This is soul restoration. This is about resetting your heart before the chaos of life starts pulling at you again. Because some of you have been surviving life without ever slowing down long enough to let God restore your spirit. You've been functioning but not resting, moving but not healing, smiling but internally carrying silent exhaustion. And the dangerous thing about silent exhaustion is that eventually it begins affecting every area of your life without you realizing it. Your patience becomes shorter. Your joy becomes weaker. Your faith becomes quieter. Your thoughts become heavier. And suddenly, even small problems start feeling overwhelming because your soul has been running on empty for too long. That is why this psalm matters. David was not writing from comfort. He was writing from pressure. He was surrounded by enemies, surrounded by betrayal, surrounded by uncertainty. There were people speaking against him, people trying to destroy him, people waiting for him to fail. Yet somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, David still chose to begin his morning with God. Think about that. He didn't wake up obsessing over his enemies. He didn't wake up replaying conversations in his mind. He didn't wake up feeding his anxiety. He woke up and turned toward God first. Why? Because David understood something most people miss. Whatever captures your attention first in the morning often controls your emotional direction for the rest of the day. And that's exactly why the enemy loves distracted mornings. Because distracted mornings create anxious minds. Anxious minds create emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion slowly weakens spiritual focus. That's why some people wake up tired even after sleeping 8 hours. Because physical sleep cannot heal a spiritually overwhelmed soul. Only God can restore that part of you. Only God can quiet the storm inside your mind. Only God can calm the pressure you cannot explain to other people. Only God can hold together the pieces of you that feel emotionally stretched thin. And maybe today, you desperately need that peace. Maybe nobody knows how much pressure you've been carrying lately. Maybe nobody realizes how tired you actually are. Maybe you've become so used to surviving that you forgot what true peace even feels like. But hear me carefully. God sees the exhaustion nobody else notices. He sees the nights you stayed awake overthinking. He sees the tears you wiped away quietly. He sees the pressure you carry silently. He sees the prayers you haven't even had words to say yet. And this morning, He is inviting you back into His presence. Not because your life is perfect. Not because you have everything figured out. Not because your problems disappeared overnight. But because peace was never supposed to come from perfect circumstances. Peace comes from the presence of God. That's why David says, "Hear my cry for help, my King and my God, for to you I pray." I love that David says, "My King and my God." Because prayer is not just about religion. Prayer is relationship. It's personal. It's intimate. It's the moment a weary soul remembers it is not abandoned. And some of you need to remember that today. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. You are not fighting alone. Even in this moment, God is near. Right now, while you're listening to this, God is near. In your room, in your car, at your workplace, in your uncertainty, in your pain, in your exhaustion, God is near. And sometimes the greatest spiritual breakthrough is not dramatic emotion. Sometimes it's simply becoming aware again that God has been with you the entire time. That changes how you walk into your day. Because when you truly know God is with you, you stop approaching life like everything depends entirely on you. You stop carrying responsibilities that belong to God. You stop panicking over every unknown detail. You stop feeling like you must control every outcome. And instead, you learn to surrender. Now let's be honest for a moment. Surrender is difficult for most people. Why? Because surrender feels vulnerable. We would rather control things than trust God with things we cannot predict. We would rather worry than wait. We would rather obsess than release. But worrying has never added peace to anybody's life. It only drains strength from today while creating fear about tomorrow. That's why David says something powerful. I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. That word lay matters deeply. David does not say, I cling to my worries. He does not say, I obsess over my fears. He does not say, I carry everything myself. He says, I lay my requests before you. In other words, he releases them. Like placing something heavy down after carrying it too long. Like setting a burden at God's feet and saying, Lord, this is too much for me to hold alone. And some of you need to do that today. Because you've been carrying emotional weight God never asked you to carry by yourself. You've been carrying guilt, carrying fear, carrying heartbreak, carrying disappointment, carrying pressure about the future. And it's exhausting you from the inside out. But God did not create you to live emotionally crushed every day of your life. He created you to walk with Him. That doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means you no longer face life alone. And there is a huge difference between those two things. Because even when circumstances stay difficult, the presence of God changes how you endure them. Suddenly you have strength that doesn't make sense, peace that doesn't match your situation, wisdom that arrives at the right moment, hope that survives hard seasons. That is what happens when God becomes your first focus instead of your last resort. And I need to say something directly to the person listening right now who feels overwhelmed. You do not need to have every answer this morning. You do not need to solve your entire future before breakfast. You do not need to carry tomorrow's burdens today. You do not need to live in constant panic about what might happen next. Jesus said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." And maybe that is exactly the word your soul needs right now. Because some of you have been mentally living in futures that haven't even happened yet. You're worrying about conversations that haven't occurred, problems that haven't appeared, outcomes you cannot control. Meanwhile, the peace God wants to give you today is being stolen by fears about tomorrow. But today, God is calling your mind back to the present moment, back to His presence, back to trust, back to stillness, back to dependence on Him. And maybe for the first time in a long time, your soul is finally beginning to breathe again. Because there is something healing about slowing down long enough to remember that God is still God. He is still faithful, still sovereign, still working, still providing, still protecting, still making ways where you cannot see a way. And if He carried you through every previous season, He will carry you through this one too. You may not know how everything will unfold. You may not understand the timing. You may not see the full picture. But God sees what you cannot see. And sometimes faith means trusting God's vision more than your own understanding. That's difficult, but that's where peace begins. Not when every question gets answered, but when your soul learns to trust the one who already holds the answers. So before this day rushes forward, pause here for a moment. Breathe deeply and quietly say this: Lord, before I carry this day, I place this day into your hands. Because that simple act of surrender can change the entire direction of your morning. And this is only the beginning. There is a battle happening every morning that most people never recognize. Not a battle you can see with your eyes, but a battle you can feel in your thoughts, your emotions, your focus, your energy, and your peace. And if the enemy cannot destroy your life completely, he will try to distract your mind constantly. Because distraction is one of the most effective spiritual weapons against purpose. A distracted mind becomes a vulnerable mind. And a vulnerable mind eventually becomes an exhausted soul. That is why so many people wake up already mentally tired. Not because the day has begun badly, but because the war inside their mind started before they even got out of bed. Some people wake up and immediately check their phone, immediately compare themselves to others, immediately absorb stress, immediately open the door to anxiety, fear, pressure, and emotional noise before they have even spoken one word to God. And without realizing it, they begin the day spiritually disconnected. That's exactly what the enemy wants. Because when your spirit is disconnected, your emotions become easier to manipulate. Your reactions become quicker. Your patience becomes thinner. Your thinking becomes clouded. Your heart becomes restless. And suddenly you're carrying tension all day long without fully understanding why. But listen carefully. Not every battle in your life is physical. Some battles are mental. Some are emotional. Some are spiritual. And one of the greatest spiritual disciplines you will ever develop is learning how to guard your mind before the world enters it. That's why Proverbs says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Everything flows from it. Your words, your decisions, your reactions, your relationships, your peace, your faith. And if your heart becomes overwhelmed every morning, eventually, your entire life begins operating from survival instead of strength. That's why Psalm 5 matters so deeply. David understood that mornings are spiritual territory. The first moments of the day are sacred because they establish direction. They establish focus. They establish posture. And the enemy knows this. That's why the enemy loves rushed mornings. Because rushed mornings leave no room for reflection, no room for stillness, no room for gratitude, no room for prayer, no room for God. And eventually, a soul without stillness becomes spiritually dehydrated. You can see it happening everywhere today. People are overstimulated but spiritually empty. Connected online but disconnected internally. Constantly consuming information but rarely experiencing peace. And the tragedy is that many people no longer know how to sit quietly in God's presence because their minds have become addicted to noise. Noise from social media, noise from stress, noise from comparison, noise from bad news, noise from endless opinions, noise from pressure to constantly perform. But God rarely speaks through chaos. Sometimes his voice is found in stillness. And that's difficult for modern people because silence makes us uncomfortable. The moment things become quiet, our buried fears begin surfacing. Our hidden worries start speaking louder. The emotions we've been avoiding suddenly become visible. So instead of slowing down, we distract ourselves again. But healing cannot happen where honesty does not exist. And maybe that's why God wants your mornings first. Because before you perform for the world, He wants to restore your soul. Before you carry responsibilities, He wants to remind you who you are. Before pressure enters your mind, He wants peace to enter your spirit. That's why Jesus Himself often withdrew early in the morning to pray. Think about that. The Son of God still prioritized stillness, still prioritized prayer, still prioritized communion with the Father before facing people. If Jesus needed quiet time with God, how much more do we? Yet most people treat prayer like an emergency exit instead of daily oxygen. They pray only when things collapse, only when fear becomes unbearable, only when they run out of options. But David shows us something different. Prayer was not his last reaction. Prayer was his first response. That changes everything. Because when prayer becomes your first response instead of your last resort, your entire emotional foundation shifts. Suddenly problems no longer feel bigger than God. Suddenly fear no longer controls every thought. Suddenly uncertainty no longer destroys your peace. And no, this does not mean life becomes easy overnight. It means you stop walking through life spiritually alone. There is a difference between carrying pressure by yourself and carrying pressure with God beside you. One crushes you. The other strengthens you through the storm. And some of you listening right now have been trying to survive life entirely in your own strength. That's why you feel drained all the time. Because human strength has limits. Eventually, your emotions collapse. Eventually, your mind gets tired. Eventually, your body feels the pressure your soul has been carrying. God never intended you to function disconnected from Him. A phone disconnected from power eventually dies. A soul disconnected from God eventually weakens. And maybe the exhaustion you feel is not just physical. Maybe it's spiritual fatigue. Maybe your soul has been craving God, while your mind keeps feeding on stress instead. Because whatever you feed grows. If you feed fear constantly, anxiety grows. If you feed comparison constantly, insecurity grows. If you feed bitterness constantly, anger grows. But if you feed your spirit daily with God's presence, peace begins growing inside you. Strength begins growing inside you. Wisdom begins growing inside you. Stability begins growing inside you. That's why the enemy fights your prayer life so aggressively. Have you ever noticed how easily you can spend an hour scrolling on your phone, but 5 minutes of prayer suddenly feels difficult? That's not accidental. The enemy does not mind you being entertained. He minds you being spiritually strong. Because spiritually strong people become difficult to manipulate emotionally. When you are rooted in God's presence, panic loses power over you. Fear loses authority over you. People's opinions lose control over you. That doesn't mean you never struggle emotionally. It means your emotions no longer become your master. And some people desperately need that freedom today. Because they are emotionally controlled by everything around them. One negative comment ruins their day. One bad moment destroys their peace. One delay creates panic. One disappointment creates hopelessness. Why? because their emotional foundation has not been anchored deeply enough in God's presence. And this is where Psalm 5 becomes transformational. David says, "In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice." Do you understand the confidence inside those words? You hear my voice. Not maybe. Not possibly. Not if I perform well enough. Not if I'm spiritually perfect enough. David approaches God with confidence that he is heard. And some of you need to hear this today. God hears you too. He hears the prayers you whisper quietly. He hears the tears you never explain to anyone. He hears the worries you carry internally. He hears the fears you hide behind your smile. Even when nobody else understands you fully, God does. And there is something deeply healing about being fully seen by God while still being fully loved. Because humans often love the version of you they understand. But God loves you completely, even knowing every broken part of you. Every fear, every struggle, every hidden insecurity, every silent battle, and He still calls you His child. That truth alone can heal parts of your soul you thought would stay broken forever. But here is where many people struggle. They think prayer is about saying the perfect words. It's not. Prayer is honesty. Sometimes prayer sounds strong and confident. Sometimes prayer sounds weak and exhausted. Sometimes prayer is worship. Sometimes prayer is tears. Sometimes prayer is silence because your soul has no words left. And God understands all of it. Religion tells people they must sound impressive before approaching God. But relationship says, come honestly. David came honestly. He brought lament, fear, confusion, pain, and God welcomed him. So why do so many people hide from God when they are struggling? Because shame convinces people that weakness makes them unworthy of God's presence. But the opposite is true. Your weakness is often where you encounter God most deeply. Because it's in weakness that you finally stop pretending you can save yourself. And maybe that is exactly where some of you are right now. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of acting strong while secretly feeling overwhelmed. Then hear this clearly. God is not asking you to impress Him this morning. He's asking you to come to Him with your exhaustion, with your fear, with your questions, with your stress, with your uncertainty. Come honestly, because healing begins where honesty enters. And one honest moment with God can shift your entire emotional atmosphere. I know some people listening have become discouraged because they prayed before and life still became difficult. You asked God for help, and the situation didn't immediately improve. You prayed for healing, and the process became longer than expected. You prayed for breakthrough, and the waiting became painful. So now part of your heart wonders if prayer even matters anymore. But listen carefully. Prayer is not magic. Prayer is relationship. The goal of prayer is not always immediate escape from difficulty. Sometimes the goal is supernatural strength inside the difficulty. And that changes how you suffer. Because without God, suffering often creates bitterness. But with God, suffering can produce endurance, wisdom, humility, compassion, and deeper trust. That's why some people walk through storms and become harder, while others walk through storms and become deeper. The difference is often whether they walked through the storm with God or without Him. David understood this deeply. That's why even surrounded by enemies, betrayal, and pressure, he still said, "I wait expectantly." That statement is powerful, because expectancy is different from anxiety. Anxiety says, "What if everything falls apart?" Expectancy says, "God is already working even if I cannot see it yet." And maybe your soul needs expectancy restored today. Because some of you have been expecting disappointment for so long that hope feels unfamiliar now. You've been bracing for bad news, preparing for failure, anticipating rejection. But God is calling you back to trust. Not blind optimism, not pretending problems don't exist, but genuine trust that God remains faithful even when life feels uncertain. And sometimes faith looks like this: waking up tired but praying anyway, feeling afraid but trusting anyway, feeling uncertain but surrendering anyway. That is spiritual maturity. Not pretending you never struggle, but refusing to let struggle separate you from God. And as you continue building this morning rhythm with God, something powerful begins happening slowly inside you. Your mind becomes calmer. Your reactions become wiser. Your heart becomes steadier. Your spirit becomes stronger. You stop being controlled by every emotion that enters your mind. Because peace is becoming your foundation instead of panic. And eventually, people begin noticing something different about you. Not perfection, not fake positivity, but stability, a quiet strength, a grounded spirit, a calmness that does not make sense considering what you've been through. That is what happens when your mornings belong to God. And the beautiful thing is this transformation usually happens gradually. Day by day, prayer by prayer, morning by morning. God rebuilds exhausted souls slowly and deeply. That's why you cannot quit just because change is not immediate. A seed planted underground does not look impressive at first, but hidden growth is still growth. And some of you are growing spiritually right now, even if you cannot fully see it yet. God is strengthening you beneath the surface, teaching you dependence, teaching you trust, teaching you stillness. So do not give up, because the same God who sustained David in chaos is sustaining you right now too. Some people are not tired because they work too much. They are tired because they think too much. They carry invisible emotional weight every hour of the day. Overthinking, overanalyzing, replaying conversations, anticipating problems that haven't even happened yet, trying to control outcomes only God was ever supposed to hold. And slowly, quietly, that emotional pressure drains the soul. You can smile while being emotionally exhausted. You can keep functioning while internally falling apart. You can continue showing up for everyone else while secretly feeling empty inside. And the frightening part is that many people become so used to carrying stress that they no longer realize how heavy their soul has become. But God sees it. He sees the tension you carry in silence. He sees the fear hidden underneath your strength. He sees the emotional fatigue nobody else notices. And today, he wants to free you from the burden of trying to control everything. Because one of the deepest roots of anxiety is control. We want certainty. We want guarantees. We want to know exactly how things will unfold before we trust God. But faith has never worked that way. Faith means walking with God without always seeing the full map ahead. And that terrifies many people because control feels safer than surrender. Even when control is exhausting. Think about how much energy people spend trying to control things they were never meant to control. Trying to control how others feel about them. Trying to control future outcomes. Trying to control relationships. Trying to control timing. Trying to control circumstances. Trying to control every possible risk. And the result? Constant mental exhaustion. Because the human mind was never created to carry the weight of total control. Only God can hold that kind of responsibility without collapsing under it. That's why surrender is not weakness. Surrender is wisdom. It is finally admitting, God, I cannot carry what only you were designed to carry. And maybe that is exactly the breakthrough some of you need right now. Because beneath your stress is fear. And beneath your fear is the belief that if you stop controlling everything, your life will fall apart. But listen carefully. Your constant worry is not what has been holding your life together. God has been holding you together this entire time. Even during the seasons you thought you would break. Even during the nights you cried alone. Even during the moments you felt abandoned. God sustained you. And the fact that you are still here proves His faithfulness already carried you through things you thought would destroy you. David understood this deeply. That's why Psalm 5 is so powerful. He says, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness." Lead me. Not give me complete control. Not explain every detail. Not show me the next 10 years. Just lead me. That is trust. Real trust says, God, I may not understand everything, but I believe you see what I cannot see. And that kind of trust transforms the soul. Because many people are emotionally exhausted not from what is happening around them, but from resisting surrender inside them. They want peace while still controlling everything. They want rest while refusing to release fear. They want God's guidance while still demanding their own timing. But peace only grows where surrender begins. And surrender is difficult because fear constantly whispers lies. Fear says, what if things never get better? What if you fail? What if God does not come through? What if you lose everything? What if this pain never ends? Fear always speaks in worst-case scenarios. That's why fear is so emotionally draining. It keeps the mind trapped in imaginary disasters that often never happen. And some of you have been mentally fighting battles that do not even exist yet. You have spent entire days worrying about outcomes that never arrived. Entire nights fearing conversations that never happened. Entire seasons anticipating rejection that never came. Fear steals peace from the present by trapping your mind in the future. That is exactly why the enemy uses fear so aggressively. Because fear distorts perspective. When fear controls you, small problems look enormous. Temporary delays feel permanent. Closed doors feel like the end of your story. But fear is a liar. Your current season is not your final chapter. Your present pain is not proof that God abandoned you. Your waiting season is not evidence that God stopped working. Sometimes God is doing his deepest work in the seasons where you see the least externally. And this is where many people lose heart, because they misunderstand hidden seasons. They think hidden seasons mean God forgot them. But hidden seasons are often preparation seasons. A seed buried underground looks forgotten until breakthrough begins pushing through the soil. And some of you are in underground seasons right now. Nothing feels clear. Nothing feels easy. Nothing feels finished. But God is still working beneath the surface, developing your character, strengthening your faith, teaching you dependence, preparing you for what you prayed for. And eventually you will realize the waiting season was not punishment, it was preparation. David understood waiting. That's why he says, I wait expectantly, not hopelessly, not bitterly, expectantly. There is faith inside expectancy. Expectation says, God has not finished writing this story yet. And some of you need your expectation restored, because disappointment has slowly trained you to expect less from life. You stopped hoping fully because disappointment hurt too much before. You stopped trusting fully because betrayal wounded you before. You stopped dreaming fully because failure discouraged you before. So now part of your heart protects itself by expecting nothing. But God did not create you to live emotionally numb. He created you to trust Him again. Not people perfectly, not circumstances perfectly, but Him. And trust is rebuilt one surrender at a time, one prayer at a time, one morning at a time. That's why mornings matter spiritually. Every morning becomes another opportunity to decide what will lead your life. Fear or faith, panic or peace, control or surrender. And every single day, your soul moves in the direction of what you practice consistently. If you practice fear consistently, anxiety deepens. If you practice bitterness consistently, hardness grows. If you practice worry consistently, emotional exhaustion increases. But if you practice trust consistently, peace slowly becomes your natural posture. Not overnight, but gradually. And real transformation is usually gradual. That frustrates many people because they want instant emotional healing. But God often heals deeply before He heals quickly. He rebuilds layer by layer, thought by thought, habit by habit, because God is not just trying to change your emotions temporarily. He is trying to transform your foundation permanently. And foundations take time. That's why some of you feel frustrated with yourselves right now. You think, why am I still struggling with fear? Why am I still overthinking? Why am I still anxious? Because healing is a process. Even spiritually mature people have moments of fear. Even strong believers have difficult mornings. Even David had moments of despair. But mature faith means learning where to take your fear. David took it to God. And that's the difference. Weakness itself is not failure. Running from God in weakness is where destruction begins. But when you bring your weakness honestly before God, something powerful happens. God meets you there, not with condemnation, not with shame, not with rejection, with grace. And some of you desperately need to understand that. God is not angry that you are struggling. He is inviting you closer while you struggle. Religion often teaches people to hide weakness, but relationship with God teaches people to bring weakness honestly into His presence. That's why David cried openly before God. That's why the Psalms feel so human. Because David was real. He worshipped honestly. He grieved honestly. He feared honestly. He trusted honestly. And God still called him a man after His own heart. Not because David was perfect, but because David kept returning to God. And maybe that is the message your soul needs today. Return again. Even if you feel weak. Even if your faith feels small. Even if your heart feels tired. Return again. Because God is not measuring you by perfection. He is responding to surrender. And surrender changes everything internally. Suddenly, your soul no longer feels responsible for controlling the entire universe. Suddenly, your mind becomes quieter. Suddenly, pressure loses some of its grip. Because you realize something powerful. God is already in tomorrow before you even arrive there. Think about that. The future you fear, God already sees completely. The conversation you are nervous about, God already knows. The problem stressing you out, God already understands the solution. Nothing catches Him off guard. Nothing surprises Him. Nothing overwhelms Him. That truth alone can calm an anxious heart. Because while you are panicking over uncertainty, God remains fully sovereign over every detail of your life. And that does not mean every circumstance will unfold exactly the way you hoped. But it does mean God will remain faithful through all of it. Even in loss, even in waiting, even in unanswered questions, God remains faithful. I know some people listening right now are carrying wounds from prayers that seemed unanswered. You trusted God for something, and it still fell apart. You believed for healing, and someone still died. You prayed for restoration, and the relationship still ended. And now part of your heart feels afraid to trust deeply again. But listen carefully to me. An unanswered prayer does not mean God stopped being good. Sometimes God protects us through closed doors we do not yet understand. Sometimes God heals differently than we expected. Sometimes God's greater purpose exists beyond what our limited perspective can currently see. And while that does not erase pain, it does remind us that God's wisdom is greater than our understanding. Faith means trusting His heart even when we cannot trace His hand. That is difficult, but that is where deep spiritual maturity grows. Not when life makes perfect sense, but when trust survives confusion. And some of you are developing stronger faith right now than you even realize. Because despite everything you've faced, you're still here listening. Still seeking God. Still praying. Still hoping. That matters. Your persistence matters. Your continued surrender matters. Every morning you choose to turn toward God instead of completely collapsing into fear, you are growing spiritually stronger. even if it feels small. And eventually, those small daily choices build an unshakable foundation. A foundation that survives storms. A foundation that survives disappointment. A foundation that survives uncertainty. Because your life is no longer built only on circumstances. It is built on God. And when God becomes your foundation, peace becomes possible even during chaos. Not fake peace. Not denials. Real peace. The kind of peace that steadies your breathing in difficult moments. The kind of peace that helps you sleep despite uncertainty. The kind of peace that reminds your soul, God is still with me here. That is the peace David found in Psalm 5. And that is the peace God wants to build inside you too. Some healing happens loudly, but the deepest healing often happens quietly. It happens in the mornings nobody applauds. The private prayers nobody hears. The tears nobody sees. The moments when you choose to keep trusting God, even while your heart still feels fragile. And I need you to understand something today. Just because your healing feels slow does not mean God is absent. Some of the most important work God does inside a person happens invisibly at first. Roots grow underground before fruit appears above ground. Foundations are built beneath the surface before buildings rise into view. And in the same way, God often strengthens your spirit privately before your breakthrough becomes visible publicly. But hidden growth still matters. In fact, hidden growth is often the most important kind. Because God is not merely trying to improve your circumstances, He is transforming you. He is rebuilding the exhausted parts of your soul, teaching your mind how to rest again, teaching your heart how to trust again, teaching your spirit how to remain steady even when life becomes uncertain. And some of you are in that rebuilding season right now. You may not fully recognize it, yet because rebuilding seasons rarely feel glamorous. Sometimes rebuilding feels confusing. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels like God is removing things instead of adding things. But pruning is not punishment. A gardener prunes what has life so it can grow stronger. And sometimes God removes distractions, relationships, habits, or false foundations because they cannot carry the future He has prepared for you. That's painful sometimes, because humans naturally cling to what feels familiar, even when it is unhealthy. We cling to toxic patterns, cling to unhealthy relationships, cling to fear because fear feels predictable, cling to old versions of ourselves because change feels uncomfortable. But growth requires release. And one of the hardest spiritual lessons is learning that not everything you lose is meant to destroy you. Some losses are actually protection. Some endings are actually redirection. Some delays are actually preparation. And years later, many people finally realize the thing they begged God to keep would have eventually broken them. That's why trust matters so deeply. Because God sees what you cannot yet see. David understood this. That's why he prayed, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness." Lead me. There is humility in those words. David understood he did not know everything. He understood his perspective was limited. He understood God's wisdom exceeded his own understanding. And mature faith still looks like that today. Mature faith is not pretending you have no questions. Mature faith is continuing to trust God even while questions remain unanswered. That kind of faith produces stability, and stability is desperately needed in today's world. Because people are emotionally collapsing under pressure. One disappointment destroys them. One rejection crushes them. One setback convinces them their life is over. Why? Because emotional strength cannot survive long-term without spiritual roots. And many people have been trying to build peaceful lives on unstable foundations. They build identity on success, identity on relationships, identity on money, identity on approval from people. But every human foundation eventually shakes. People disappoint you. Money fluctuates. Success changes. Circumstances shift. That's why God wants to become your foundation instead of just your emergency contact. Because only God remains steady when everything else becomes uncertain. And when your soul becomes rooted in Him, storms stop having the power to completely destroy your peace. That doesn't mean storms disappear. It means you stop collapsing every time they arrive. Some of you listening right now are stronger than you realize. You've survived heartbreak that should have shattered you. You've endured pressure that should have crushed you. You've walked through seasons where you honestly did not know how you would keep going. And yet here you are, still breathing, still seeking God, still listening, still hoping. Do not overlook that. The enemy wants you to focus only on how far you still have to go. But God wants you to recognize how far He has already brought you. Because survival itself is evidence of grace. There were moments you thought emotionally would destroy you completely. Moments you thought you would never recover from. Yet somehow God sustained you one day at a time. Not always dramatically, not always instantly, but faithfully. That is how God often works. Not always through sudden miracles, but through daily mercy. Strength for one more day. Peace for one more moment. Grace for one more step. And eventually, those daily mercies carry you farther than you imagined possible. That's why Scripture says, His mercies are new every morning. Every morning. Not once in your lifetime. Not only during perfect seasons. Every morning. Because God understands something about the human soul. You need fresh grace daily. Yesterday's strength cannot carry today's burdens forever. Yesterday's peace cannot automatically sustain today's challenges. That's why returning to God each morning matters so much. Every morning becomes an opportunity for renewal. Renewal of perspective. Renewal of strength. Renewal of peace. Renewal of trust. And if you neglect that renewal long enough, emotional exhaustion eventually begins taking over your life. You become irritable constantly, overwhelmed easily, discouraged quickly, numb spiritually, not because you are weak, but because your soul was never designed to operate disconnected from God for extended periods of time. And unfortunately, many people only realize this after burnout arrives. They keep pushing themselves harder, ignoring emotional warning signs, ignoring spiritual dryness, ignoring internal exhaustion, until eventually the soul forces them to slow down. sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through emotional collapse, sometimes through complete exhaustion. But exhaustion is often the soul's cry for reconnection. Your spirit is trying to tell you something. Slow down. Return to God. Rest in His presence again. And hear me carefully. Rest is not laziness. Rest is trust. When you rest spiritually, you are declaring, God, I trust you enough to stop carrying what only you can carry. That is deeply powerful, because many people secretly believe everything depends entirely on them. They feel responsible for fixing everyone, helping everyone, holding everything together constantly. And while responsibility is important, carrying the entire emotional weight of the world is not your assignment. You are human. You have limits, and ignoring those limits eventually damages your soul. Even Jesus rested. Even Jesus withdrew from crowds. Even Jesus spent time alone with the Father. Why? Because constant output without spiritual renewal eventually empties a person internally. And some of you have been pouring into everyone else while neglecting your own soul. You encourage everybody else, help everybody else, support everybody else, but secretly you feel empty yourself. And maybe nobody notices because you have become skilled at hiding your exhaustion. But God notices. He notices the weariness behind your smile, the heaviness behind your silence, the pressure behind your strength. And He is not asking you to continue pretending you are okay when internally you are struggling. He wants honesty, because healing begins when honesty enters God's presence. That's why David spoke openly with God. He did not hide fear, did not hide pain, did not hide confusion. He brought all of it honestly before God. And God honored that honesty. Some people think strong faith means never struggling emotionally. But real spiritual maturity means learning how to bring your struggles into God's presence instead of hiding them in shame. Because shame isolates. Shame convinces people they must fix themselves before approaching God. But the gospel says the opposite. You come to God broken, and He begins restoring you there. That restoration takes time sometimes. And that frustrates people because modern culture worships instant results. Instant success. Instant healing. Instant gratification. But God often works slowly because deep transformation cannot be rushed. A tree that grows too quickly develops weak roots. And weak roots cannot survive storms. So God develops roots first. Roots of trust. Roots of humility. Roots of endurance. Roots of dependence on Him. And eventually, those roots create unshakable stability. That's why some people remain peaceful during storms that would emotionally destroy others. It's not because they never struggle emotionally. It's because their roots go deeper. Their peace is not dependent on perfect circumstances anymore. Their identity is not dependent on human approval anymore. Their hope is not dependent on temporary success anymore. They have learned to anchor themselves in God. And that changes everything. Because when God becomes your anchor, storms stop defining you. Yes, waves still crash. Yes, pain still hurts. Yes, uncertainty still feels difficult, but your soul no longer drifts aimlessly every time life becomes unstable. You remain anchored, and maybe that is what God is developing in you right now. Not temporary emotional excitement, but lasting spiritual stability. The kind of stability that survives disappointment. The kind of stability that survives betrayal. The kind of stability that survives waiting seasons. Because life will always contain storms. But storms do not have to destroy your peace anymore. Not when your soul learns how to stay anchored in God's presence. That's why Psalm 5 matters so much. David was not praying from a perfect life. He was praying from pressure. Yet even surrounded by enemies, uncertainty, and emotional stress, he still chose to begin his day with God. And that decision protected his perspective. Because perspective determines emotional direction. If you focus only on problems, fear grows. If you focus only on uncertainty, anxiety grows. But when your eyes remain fixed on God's faithfulness, strength begins growing even inside difficult seasons. And some of you need your perspective restored today. You have stared at problems for so long that they now appear larger than God in your mind. But your problem is not bigger than God's power. Your delay is not bigger than God's timing. Your weakness is not bigger than God's grace. Nothing in your life is beyond His ability to redeem. Nothing, even the broken parts, even the painful parts, even the parts you feel ashamed of. God can restore what feels ruined, heal what feels wounded, rebuild what feels lost. That's who He is. And right now, even in this moment, He is rebuilding parts of you that you thought would remain permanently damaged. Your trust, your peace, your hope, your strength. Slowly, faithfully, deeply. Before you move forward into the rest of your day, pause here for one final moment. Breathe slowly. Because this moment matters more than you realize. Not because these words themselves are magical, but because right now your soul is standing at a crossroads. One path leads back into fear, panic, pressure, distraction, emotional exhaustion, and carrying burdens alone. The other path leads into surrender, into peace, into trust, into walking through life with the awareness that God is with you in every single moment. And the choice begins every morning. That is why Psalm 5 is so powerful. David did not wait until life became easier before turning toward God. He turned toward God first, before the battle, before the stress, before the pressure, before the uncertainty. And maybe that is the shift God is trying to create inside your life right now. Not just occasional prayer during emergencies, but daily dependence. Because when dependence on God becomes your lifestyle, peace stops being temporary. It becomes foundational. And that is what your soul desperately needs. Not another temporary emotional high. Not another motivational moment that fades after a few hours. You need deep spiritual grounding. Because storms will still come. Unexpected phone calls will still happen. People will still disappoint you. Life will still contain uncertainty. But when your soul is anchored in God's presence, difficult moments stop having the power to completely destroy your peace. That is spiritual maturity. Not a life without storms, but a spirit that remains steady during them. And I believe some of you are stepping into a new season beginning today. Not because your circumstances instantly changed overnight, but because your posture toward God is changing. You are learning to surrender instead of panic, to pray instead of obsess, to trust instead of control. And those small daily decisions slowly transform an entire life, one surrendered morning at a time. That's why I need you to hear this clearly. You do not need to have everything figured out today. You do not need to carry the entire future on your shoulders. You do not need to solve every problem before the sun sets. God never asked you to carry responsibilities that belong to Him. He asked you to trust Him. And trust grows when you repeatedly bring your fears into God's presence instead of carrying them alone. That's what David did. Every morning he returned again,